This is the story. Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, kingdom builder, healer. He is the King of glory. He is the resurrecting Savior. They expected a conqueror, but instead they got a servant, crucified and lifted high. And the marks on his hands left us marked for salvation.
Well, we are in week 5 of our series where we have been going through Revealed and looking at the Gospel of Mark. And we are doing these midweek videos that just go a little bit further, talking about another story that we weren't able to cover on the weekend. And so this weekend we're working through Mark chapter 9, and I am joined by Chelsea, our children's director, and Matthew, our youth director. And so family ministry is here representing really strong today. So... But we're talking about Mark chapter 9, and this weekend the message was looking at the transfiguration that happened on the mountain and how the disciples are still trying to grapple with who is Jesus. It's still kind of that continuation from last week in chapter 8 where he asked, "Who do you say that I am?" Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing these moments where they're not quite getting it, and they're having these crisis moments because they don't really understand. Mm-hmm. And the stories in Mark 9 really kind of feature that idea of crisis and understanding who Jesus is. Have you guys ever had a crisis moment in your walk?
Yeah, there was definitely a time in my life when I did, and I was very upset about how it was transpiring, and I was praying, and I was going to the altar almost every Sunday, like just begging the Lord to answer this prayer in one way. And he answered it, but not in the way that I had been praying for him to answer it. So I really just had to trust the Lord knew best in that moment.
Yeah, those moments where our expectations and our way of thinking that a situation should work, when it doesn't match with God, it sometimes does cause that crisis. Yeah. So how about you, Matthew?
It was right around the time that I was figuring out what the next step was, and I didn't think that ministry was going to be the call, but then it was like a little bit of time before it, I just felt disconnected from God, and it was like that crisis of, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm doing something right, or I'm not doing enough, I'm not worthy, of all those lies from the enemy, and really just pulled me away from it. But then there was an event that just happened, and it just realigned everything, and it completely broke down. It was that reset that was needed for it.
Yeah, the enemy and the subtle lies. That's a great thing that we do have to wrestle with, because it happens so often. My crisis was very similar to yours. That moment of, am I to do ministry? Am I not to do ministry? And I thought I was supposed to do ministry at 14 years of age. I thought this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I went through a really rough season in the church, and really didn't like the church, didn't like church leadership. And had a lot of arguments with God about, I don't want to be a pastor, they're jerks, and sometimes we still are, but those moments of wrestling and trying to figure it out when it doesn't match the way you think it should work.
Right.
So we're looking at another story that's one of my favorite stories from the Gospel of Mark in chapter 9. It starts in verse 14, and it's picking up after Jesus and the 3 disciples are coming back down the mountain. And it says, when they returned to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd surrounding them, and some teachers of religious law were arguing with them. When the crowd saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with awe, and they ran to greet him. "What is all this arguing about?" Jesus asked. One of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, "Teacher, I brought my son so that you could heal him. He is possessed by an evil spirit that won't let him talk, and whenever the spirit seizes him, it throws him violently to the ground, and then he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast out the evil spirit, but they couldn't do it." Jesus said to them, "You faithless people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought the boy. But when the evil spirit saw Jesus, it threw the child into a violent convulsion, and he fell to the ground, writhing and foaming at the mouth. "How long has this been happening?" Jesus asked the boy's father. He replied, "Since he was a little boy. The spirit often throws him into the fire or into water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us and help us if you can." "What do you mean, if I can?" Jesus asked. Anything is possible if a person believes. The father instantly cried out, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. When Jesus saw that the crowds and onlookers were growing, he rebuked the evil spirit. Listen, you spirit that makes this boy unable to hear and speak. I command you to come out of this child and never enter him again. Then the spirit screamed and threw the boy into another violent convulsion and left him. The boy appeared to be dead. A murmur ran through the crowd as the people said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and he helped him to his feet and he stood up. Afterward, when Jesus was alone in the house with his disciples, they asked, why couldn't we cast out the evil spirit? Jesus replied, this kind can only be cast out by prayer. So as we read through the story, I always love to ask the question as we read, like, what was it that captured your attention as we went through the story?
There was two things that caught my eye, and it was verse 24, which is immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, but help my unbelief.
Yeah.
Which I think that kind of goes for like a lot of people, especially like when we're putting our faith in God. We know that we believe in God. We know that he's real. But sometimes those lies of the enemy or our self-doubt, our self-sabotage gets in the way, and we're like, there's that little bit of doubt that like, is this really going to work? Am I worthy enough to get the grace and mercy of God for my prayers to actually be fulfilled?
Yes. That is one of my favorite prayers. And I find myself praying that often myself. For me.
Yeah.
God, I believe, help my unbelief.
I think, the second part, which kind of then goes into that as well, is the last verse 29, and he said to them, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. Like, the prayer is so powerful, and we know that it's powerful. We know that the power of prayer can overcome darkness, can cast out anything, as long as we are truly meaning it and saying it in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
But we forget that, it's more than just saying I'm going to pray or saying, oh, I was praying. It's your full heart, your full mind, putting everything into it, believing that the prayer you're lifting up to God will be fulfilled because of who God is, not because of who you are.
Right. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So those popped out to me, but then the verse right before that says, what do you mean if I can? Jesus asked. Anything is possible if a person believes. So that just kind of goes along with what you were saying. It's who he is, what he's able to do. And that's what just like popped out at me. We just have to remember who he is and what he's able to do, no matter what we think we're capable of doing.
Yeah. And I love the emphasis on prayer, because I don't think that we always value it. I think throughout the Gospels, you see Jesus multiple times challenging his disciples. If you ask for it in my name, if you believe, there's another story that we come across later that talks about if if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can look at a mountain and say, move, and it will do it. Yeah. And I just don't think we understand that sometimes we look at prayer as like this last resort or this little bit that we can offer when honestly...
Understanding that it's the most important thing.
Yeah. It's powerful. And I love that reminder that he had of what do you mean if I can?
Right.
That understanding of we don't always get who Jesus is.
Right.
We don't always understand who it is that we're praying to, that we're talking to.
Right.
And I think that's just that, to me, that's that moment that Mark is sprinkling in the story where he's like, get a bigger picture of who he is.
Yeah.
That even in the intro, that when the crowd saw him coming, they were overwhelmed with awe.
Right.
He hadn't said anything. He hadn't done anything. But there was just something in his presence that reminded them who he was.
Right.
I think those are just, those are some key moments in this story.
Right.
So... thinking about this story then, I always love to look at it and say, like, what kind of emotions are in the story? Because emotions play into the actions of the people.
Right. So my first thought is to go to the father. Like, I feel like he felt helpless and like desperation. Like they've been dealing with this with his kid for their entire life. And he probably felt a little bit hopeless. Like, we're still dealing with this after so many people prayed.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thought I think of is like as a parent, you feel like helpless and like just desperate.
Yeah, you
for
can
something
you
to-
can almost feel that. Like, I know I understand it as a parent.
Right.
That moment of like, if I had a child that was just sick and you've gone to specialists and other people and you get to this place where you're going to another one and there's this, I understand why he said, if you can.
Yeah.
I mean, you do lose hope. You do get to that place where you're like, we've seen all these experts and they haven't done anything.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the emotions that I kind of focused on, mainly because I know that it's something that was a part of like my story and growing as well, is the doubt stemmed from fear. Kind of like how you had said it, is like, you know, they know that God is real and they're like, I believe, but please help my unbelief. They're like just that little bit that is just can overpower the rest of our belief. One little bit of doubt will push everything else out the window.
Yeah. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes don't we feel shame and guilt when we have doubt?
Yes.
And I think, again, like you were talking about at the beginning, that lies the enemy tells us.
Right.
You know, he comes along and he's so subtle where there's a hint of some truth in what he says, but it's just like right next to it. Because if it was really far off from the truth, we would instantly reject it.
Yeah.
But he comes up
Enough
real
to confuse
close,
us.
but just enough to pull us away, you know.
I think another one of the emotions, and I kind of noticed it, found the right word when you had said shame, but I feel like in verse 19, the disciples could be feeling just a little bit of shame because Jesus' response is, "You faithless generation."
I know. That's one of those hard statements, right?
To me, I'm like, man, if my pastor or the person I was going to told me that.
How long must I be with you?
Exactly. You're telling me that I'm a burden, but that's not what he's saying. He's like, hey, like I've told you what to do. I've given you the lesson already. And then at the end when he's saying, hey, he comes back, he collects himself, and he's like, the answer is prayer.
Yeah.
Through prayer.
Yeah.
Jesus might say some words to you that are like, wow, that is hitting my heart, but that's the conviction that we need. And then he'll slow down and he's like, hey, it's okay. Just breathe through it. You're going to be fine. I'm going to tell you the answer again, but here is the answer.
Yeah, and that's a difference. Like conviction points out those areas where we're wrong, we're out of step with God. But it invites us into a place of change. Whereas shame just drives us into hiding. You know. And so, but yeah, I mean, you think about it, and the disciples, they were probably frustrated because they had, in the earlier chapters, they had been sent out by Jesus, and they were healing the sick, and they were casting out evil spirits, and they were teaching. And why didn't it work this time? We did everything the same, you know. Those, again, that crisis of faith moment. So then thinking about the story and those ideas of doubt and hopelessness, we talked about that being in this story. What are some practical ways that we can reflect on this as people reading this story, that we can look at and say, how do I deal with that doubt? What can I do to reduce it, to focus on Jesus?
Yeah. The first thing I think of is like holding on to God's promises. Like there's a bunch of promises in Scripture who He says who we actually are, regardless what we think or what other people might tell us or what the world tells us. So I think that's the one thing that helps me is holding on to His promises. Because even when I have self-doubt, like I have to go back and remind myself of those. And even seeing the just the bigger picture that God sees everything. Like we only see these small amounts. Even with my story, with my my crisis of like I didn't know that it was going to be one of the best things that happened to me in my life. The Lord turned it around. But I couldn't see that in that moment. So I'm just stuck in that little small piece when He sees the whole big thing. So we just have to trust that God knows what He's doing.
That almost goes back to chapter 8 when He's looking at Peter and saying, you're seeing this from man's point of view. You need to see it from God's.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of the ways that helps me personally is that prayer that becomes worship, where it's like what I am praying is what I am living by. Like if I'm praying for guidance, I'm not going to go focus on something else. I'm going to focus on Jesus and keep my eyes on Him, run that race we're supposed to the way that we're supposed to. And also I think we forget sometimes that prayer also means just sitting in his presence. Prayer doesn't mean that you have to have words to articulate. Sometimes it's just me reading off a piece of paper that says, my God is mightier than, my God is greater than, my God still loves me no matter what. It's like those reaffirming the characteristics of God to where it's a blessing over us. It's that the reaffirming that I know that I can trust God through all of his abilities, not just when I need him or just on this one ability. It's all of his abilities.
Just making it a daily worship, regardless.
Yeah, taking it and making it more than just words we say.
Exactly.
But like actually focusing on it, you know. And I mean, that's that whole, we're really good at worrying, which worrying is just negative meditation.
Right.
It's focusing on the things we can't change.
Right.
What if we shift to focusing on the truths and the things that we know and that worship, prayerful attitude?
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that in this story, it's also the simple reminder of the disciples came to Jesus afterwards in this room, and they were together and they're struggling with this doubt and this question, and it's like, it's okay. It's part of that is that community that can help bring you to Jesus. You know, that community for the Father, he brought them to the disciples, and the disciples got him to Jesus. And, you know, sometimes that's what we need, is those people around us that can encourage.
Yeah, that's actually very important, not to isolate yourself in those moments.
So, well, I hope this study has been helpful. I hope this video has inspired you guys to go a little bit further and deeper. There is the chair time that I'm encouraging you to do in the devotions. There's the table talk for you to do with a small group or with some friends, whatever it is that you're choosing to do. But I would encourage you, just continue to dig in to the Gospel of Mark, as Mark is revealing Jesus to us throughout these stories and these pages that we turn. And we'll hopefully have you join us next week.